Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean casting nets, fish nerds, fish nerds, fish nerds, it's a podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fish Nerds, a show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, licensed fishing guide, and your best friend. And I'm joined by my beautiful co-host, the Crappie Hippie. Hey, Crappie Hippie.
Hey, Clay, this is your beautiful co-host working for my beautiful boss, executive producer, and chief executive fish nerd, Clay Groves. I am John King, the Crappie Hippie, here with you to co-host a show that is always entertaining, usually funny, and mostly true. I am also the co-founder of Glasswater Angling Lead-Free Fishing. You can find us at glasswaterangling.com. But excited to be here. Got a great show for you today. But first of all, how you doing, my good friend?
I'm doing good. Yesterday, I went to Portland, Maine, to get an MRI. That's what I said. I have to drive far from where I live to get to go to the doctors. But because as it turns out, here's what happened to my knee. I have a tear of my posterior root ligament attachment to the median meniscus with resulting of extrusion of the body. That's my diagnosis.
Ow.
Yeah, you know what that means? My knee hurts.
Yeah.
I don't know what we do about it. But while I was in Portland, since I was at the ocean, I thought maybe I'd buy a Maine fishing license and go hit the jetty over at Camp Ellis. Camp Ellis is where Captain Sean Tibbetts keeps his boat, Miss Megan 2, MaineTunaFishing.com. You weren't there, but I went there to do some fishing. But here's the funny thing. Buying a fishing license through I don't know if all DNRs are like this, but New Hampshire is really hard to buy it online on your phone. It's also very hard in Maine. And it took me 40 minutes to buy my fishing license in Maine. But John, even bigger than that, what do you think it costs? Don't look it up. If you're not a resident of Maine, to buy a fishing license to fish the ocean in Maine. What do you think? Just ballpark. If you're guessing a number.
50.
50. Yeah. Okay. What about a one-day license? Maybe.
18.
Maybe, right? $1 for a year. $1. Took me 45 minutes to give them $1.
Man, the saltwater licenses are so much more reasonable. I guess because the ocean's pretty self-stocking or something.
Well,
correct?
so Maine's Fish and Game Department, or DNR, whatever they call it, is funded mostly through state taxes, right? So that supports that industry. What they want people to do is register that they're fishing in the ocean for survey reasons more than anything. They just want to know who's doing it. So that's why it's a $1 fee. They probably couldn't get away with a $0 fee. So $1.
That is outstanding. You know, a little anomaly, and I may have talked about this on the show, I'm not sure, but one of the coolest states to buy a fishing license in is Maryland, in that they say for a non-resident, we're going to charge you what you would charge us to fish in your state. So if you're Georgia and you charge people $50 and you can only buy a year license, you can't buy a daily, then that's what you have to pay if you're from Georgia and you want to go fish in Maryland. Now, Kansas costs you, you can get a daily for $7. So you can fish in Maryland for $7 a day. And that's awful cool. I thought, way to do it.
Unless, in New Hampshire, we have expensive fishing licenses. Resident license for year round in New Hampshire is $65 and daily was $15.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah.
I don't like it. Now I don't like it so much.
Now I don't like it so much. Well, Canada's worth $30 for a resident, and non-residents about twice that. And but yeah, we've got all kinds of options like lifetime or 5 years at a time, or all kinds of stuff.
We have all that stuff too. Yeah. So but you didn't ask me the most important question about my ocean fishing trip.
Oh yeah, what did you catch, if anything? Let's hear it.
Nothing. Fish don't live in the ocean. I'm confident. I fished for quite a long time, and then I snagged a couple times on some seaweed and lost my lure twice and decided to quit. But I did see a sturgeon roll around the shallows. Come up out of the water and do a barrel roll in the shallows.
Oh, how cool!
So you don't see sturgeon very often, so for me that was pretty exciting.
Oh, you bet. That's worth 2 lures and $1. Yeah, easily.
And 40 minutes on the internet.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I don't want to keep going down this. I've got a great story I'll tell you another time, but all right, about getting stopped and the warden trying to get us to get licenses and because we didn't have them on us, but he finally was just like, Oh, to heck with this app. Well, I am telling the story. All right. He said, to
You
heck
already
with this
did it.
app.
You might
Yeah.
get to
And he just said, he goes, I just saw you with fishing rods in your hand. I didn't see you actually fishing. I'm not going to do anything. Goodbye.
Yeah. He gave up.
He gave up.
I take it back. There is a state, South Carolina has an app for their licensing, and that was easy to do. I take it back. That's an example of a good one. So there's probably other good ones, but I haven't seen very many.
Well, that is crazy, crazy, crazy.
Yep.
Well, I got to go fishing back at Linda's Lake with Tommy. And you want to hear about that?
Yeah. Where is Linda's Lake?
Linda's Lake's just a little ways away from me, outside of town, next down the road from me, called Gardner.
Kansas.
And this is the guy that manages this lake for this lady, and it's really good bass fishing. Anyway, that's the place where we caught the 60 bass last time. We only caught about 40 some this time.
Only 40 something.
Yeah, it was tough. You know,
if I get a 5 bass day, I'm having an amazing day, John. I don't know what you're
well,
saying.
and usually that's true. See, that's why whenever Tommy calls me up and says, "Hey, you want to go do this?" All he hears is the phone hit the floor because I'm already out the door. But yeah, it's a great place to fish. But I like to mess around and figure things out and see what works and what doesn't work and test tackle and all that. And so he waxes me on a regular basis over there because he fishes the same way all the time. And the way he fishes is to take a 1/8 or 1/4 ounce tungsten weight and a 5-inch Strike King shimmy stick in sweet tater pie, which is a black, red, orange, and yellow worm. And that pond has a lot of carp in it, so we figure that's kind of why the bass love it so much. But I finally figured out what the deal was. We were contending with there's lotus and there's coontail milfoil in there. And, I've been trying to lighter weights and floating rigs and head down and Neko and all this kind of stuff. And he still just thrashes me. And he complains, it's really hard to get this bait to move through this, even with a tungsten sinker. He's like, it's really hard to get this worm through all that stuff. But what I figured finally, because I used a little hematite weight, same worm, same size hook, same everything except a lighter weight. He would still nose down into that grass, but not as far. And, mostly kind of stay on top. And it was a lot easier to fish. But what I figured out is that the bass were clearly attracted to the sound of that bigger weight, that bigger disturbance of that weight going through that stuff. I mean, it's got to be it. I'm such a finesse fishing head that I didn't even think of the opposite. And I finally, when I fished exactly to the letter, the way he was fishing, I got back in the game. I started having a big, good time. But power fishers, I surrender. You are right. You are right. You with your 3/4 ounce this and your 1 ounce that and your 1/2 ounce the other. I'm with you all the way, because sometimes you want to plow through stuff, and sometimes you want to punch through stuff, and sometimes you want to make a disturbance and make a little noise.
Well, I'm bass fishing. That's noise and disturbance is where it's at. When I take clients out bass fishing, they go, should we be quiet? I'm like, no. Should cast gently? I'm like, nope. Get sloppy, make a mess.
Yeah, big splash, rip it through there. You better know it.
Yeah, the noisier the better. So
the noisier the better.
Solid advice, John.
It's me discovering something that a kid already knows or whatever. And Tommy, he's just like, I just fish what works. He goes, I've never been able to figure you out with all your trying all these different things.
What I do? Like if I'm fishing with someone who's just really got dialed in, I will stand next to them and I will mirror their movements.
Even their movements.
Stand the way they're standing. My posture matches theirs. I try to hold my rod the same way. I try to cast the same way.
Breathe at the same rate.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, they're doing something. You don't know what something they're doing is working, but something's working, and I'm gonna do it all.
There you go. We're gonna do it all. Do it all. Yeah. Well, that is sage advice, and I finally it dawned on me to cue into something that I should already know. So that was a pretty cool episode over at the fabled Linda's Lake. Hey man, we got some housekeeping to do here. Can I do it real quick?
Why don't we give a rundown of the show first, then we'll do the housekeeping.
All right. Okay, so let's see. We're going to start off. We got a Dad Day entry from Jeanette Clifton, and that is Rosie's mama. And this is the entry that started the whole contest thing off. We are still taking entries. I think we have 1 or 2 come in, but we need a lot more. So if you had a lot of good experiences or even one good experience fishing with your dad and you want to talk about it, get in touch with us. Or if you're a dad that wants to talk about fishing with your kids, get in touch with us. The easiest way to get in touch with us is to call the Fish Nerds hotline, Clay.
607-378-FISH. at 607-378 fish 3474
3474.
3474. You also can go to fishnerds.com, click on the microphone button, record it there. And the third way to do it would be to grab your phone and use your voice memo function, record it on your phone, email it to clay@fishnerds.com. So 3 ways you can do it. Either way, we'll get them and we'll get you entered to win. John, what are the prizes?
First prize is $50 worth of glass water stuff. That'll be a t-shirt, and another $25 worth of goodies in terms of Angle King and Crappie Doodler and Split Shot and Jig Heads and some of the other fun stuff that we carry. Second prize is $25. The third prize is $10. And I will send, even if it's just a sticker or a thank you or this or that, but I'm going to send everybody that enters something, just like I did for National Podcast Posting Month.
Excellent. Thank you, John. All right. So big show.
Big show. Next thing we got fish in the news. Got some good stories. We got our bummer story. We've got a cool story. We've got some fun stories, and we've got an exciting crime story for you this week.
True crime in the fishing podcast.
True crime in the fishing podcast. And then we're going to have a wonderful, amazing interview. I've been so excited about this piece. I got it in. Rosie. Rosie is our kid correspondent, Rosie Clifton, and she interviews Mr. Andy Weiner, who wrote a wonderful, wonderful kids book called Down by the River. It's a wonderful book, and she does a wonderful job interviewing him. And you know something about this book, Clay?
Well,
it took me only 10 days to read it.
Wow. You got to sound it all out.
But it said, listen, dude, it said 3 to 8 years on the cover.
Well, look at you. You're winning.
I'm winning, man. I'm winning. I'm smarter than like everybody.
Yeah.
But anyway, bad jokes aside, hang in there and get ready to have some fun listening to that. And we're going to talk about Mr. Weiner's other organization, or his interest outside of being a writer. He is on the board of Reeling in Serenity, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we've got a culinary corner inspired by Joe Henry, the gentleman we had on to talk about sturgeon. Well, we're talking about fixing sturgeon. Joe Henry's going to start us off, and I'm going to finish it up. So we'll have a culinary corner for you, and then we are going to get on out of here.
It sounds like a big show. Well, why don't we start off with our dad date entries and get into it?
All right, let's do it.
All right. So the first dad date entry is it Jeanette Clifton?
Jeanette Clifton.
Jeanette
Rosie's
Clifton.
mama.
I had actually just called my stepfather the other day and said to him, do you remember when I caught that 3-pound bass on a little 202 rod and I drug it up on the beach and it was full of sand by the time you got across the pond to me? And I said, I'm still that girl. I'm still fighting that fish out of the water, just dragging it up with everything I have sometimes. And you did that. You did that, Dad. So it's a lifetime passion, and that these kids are gonna have that, and we need more kids to have that.
Well, thank you, Jeanette, for submitting that. Again, we can submit yours by calling 607-378-FISH. John, we got another one from our friend Dave. You want to play that now? I'm gonna play it.
Let's do it. Absolutely.
Hey, Clay and Crappie Hippie. This is Dave with the Fish and Tips YouTube channel. I am calling in with my favorite fishing memory with my father. I want to talk about the time that we went camping on High Lake in northern Wisconsin. We got to camp out on an island, had to take the boat out there, and we just had a great time doing some fishing for panfish, a little bit of muskie fishing, even though we didn't catch a muskie. And we also took some panfish and we ended up cooking them over the fire for breakfast one morning. It was absolutely excellent. And I really want to get back out there and do it again.
Well, there it is. Dave's entered.
Well, both. Well, I love both those stories. Jeanette's just, got me right on the heartstrings the first time I heard it. And it's even better the next time around. And Dave, that sounds so classic. Just some good dad time, fish for breakfast. I mean, that's what it's all about, baby. That's what it's all about. Envy. It sounds too fun.
Excellent. And this Father's Day contest, we're going to run it well past Father's Day. So probably into July sometime. Try to get as many people entered as possible. And again, to enter, just call the Fish Nerds hotline. That's what Dave did, 607-378-FISH. And of course, you heard the other ways earlier. So And more information is in the show notes. So get in on this contest. Great prizes from Glasswater Angling. John, let's get into the news.
Let's do it.
News, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
Okay, you brought it. You bring it.
I brought it. I'll bring it. Okay, let's do it. A sobering report on migratory fish. And this is one that you need to go read. It's a big, long report, and I'm only going to skim it here. But the Living Planet Index has done a report on world fish migration for the World Fish Foundation, and follow that link and you have a nice report that you can read. However, you've got to go down. You go down to download the report. You'll get a PDF, and then you can take a look at it. But the news is not good. I will tell you this right now. The news is not good. Fish migrations are in big trouble. The amount of what we call free rivers keeps getting, although in some places it is actually reversing, it's still throughout on a global status, free rivers are becoming a rarity. Outside of South America and a few other places, most of your rivers have dams and so forth, and we're stopping up more of them. And let me ask
it's funny, John. People don't realize like how many dams exist. Like I live in New Hampshire, right? Small state,
right?
One of the smallest states. If you were to just guess how many dams we have in the state, what would you guess?
100,
3,000.
Oh my gosh!
Right. So the main rivers that go to the ocean, there's not that many of them. There's a few, right? 2 or 3 dams for those big rivers. But every tributary of those rivers have a dam. Most of our ponds have a dam on them at some point. Most of our big lakes have dams to make them bigger, or they've dammed up for ice harvesting back in the day, or recreation makes the body of water bigger. So we have a lot of dams, a lot of damn dams in the state. And you'll find that in a lot of like New England states, really high number of dams. And I wouldn't be shocked to see that number similar anywhere where there's a lot of rivers, because people want to stop them up. They want to grind they want to run their mills. They want to grind their grains or whatever they want to do with the rivers. They're going to do it. And those dams screw up those anadromous fish.
Well, and then like you say, we say all the time, we concentrate on the rock stars like salmon and so forth, but we're talking about shad, lampreys, other things that need to migrate.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is what little there is that North America, and this kind of snuck Canada in on us, because Canada does a lot better job with this sort of thing than we do, although they are not without sin, has the lowest number of migratory fish problems, migratory fish interruptions, either through pollution, any kind of degradation, either pollution or obstruction. Only about 24% of our migratory stocks are in trouble. But when you move into, say, other places, Europe, for example, 80-some% of their migratory stocks are in decline or in some sort of trouble. And then as far as like a lot of places in Asia and so forth, they just don't have the data. So,
and some of those countries aren't going to release the data or let us have access to it, even if they were.
Exactly. But anyway, our own Tim Tacklebox Beat sent this in. It's something you can sit down and study.
And thank you, Tim, for bringing us down.
Yeah, totally. But it's something you've got to read and understand that we are in so many areas. We are really hitting a tipping point, and the time to get upset and the time to, fight back with your voice and your vote and your money. Now is the time, and now is the time to quit making excuses and decide, where you're going to land on this stuff, and understand that these fish, they're the only ones we're going to get. We got to take care of them. We not just because they feed people, that's important too, but because nothing in nature exists in isolation. I'm watching 3 Body Problem. Can you pick that up? But it's true. And without the migratory fish, we're talking cascade effects. Anyway, download the PDF and take a look at this, and you'll see where the problems are, and where the rivers are still running free. But all rivers are in danger, whether they're running free now. There's always somebody somewhere with a big idea to take that energy, take that power, take that river, and do something unsustainable with it. So read the report and sharpen your teeth.
All right. Message delivered, John.
All righty. Thank you very much for. All right. This next story is how a bizarre monster fish hoodwinked researchers and reeled in a wave of citizen scientists. A giant ocean sunfish washed up on the shore in Oregon, and a bunch of people came out and had a look at it and did not know what it was. You know, is this a monster? Is this a thing? And it turned out to be a giant hoodwinker sunfish, not the common ocean sunfish, but a even more rare hoodwinker sunfish. And
so not the mola mola, right?
Not the mola mola, but the mola tecta.
Tecta.
And it was only discovered because when they put pictures of it on the news, a scientist that specializes in this in California said, excuse me, but I happen to be the world's authority on this particular fish. And what you have there is a very rare mola tecta. So the hoodwinker sunfish, I didn't know. Did you know there was such a thing?
Well, I knew about mola molas. I knew about the ocean sunfish, but the tecta one I've never heard of before. But it's a new fish.
It is.
Not a new fish, newly discovered fish. It's been around a long time.
Well, it's really, really interesting. And I am going to have to change this link because I pulled up the wrong article and put the wrong link in here. But so I'm kind of winging it right now, folks. But
right. Well, so here's the fun thing about that ocean sunfish, John. They can get to be 800 pounds.
It's crazy how huge this thing is.
Yeah, monstrous fish. Really cool. Have you ever seen ocean sunfish in real life, mola mola?
No, I have not. Not.
Last year, Dave Kellum sent me a video of one he saw in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, when he was out boating, and it's just wildest, stupidest looking fish there is. And then there's a popular YouTube went viral a few years ago where people in Massachusetts saw one, and they're going, "It's a freaking whale, dude! Guy, it's a whale!" And they went crazy with that. We shared it on the podcast. Really funny stuff. As they're just wild looking animals. They don't look real. They don't have like a true tail. They're just this weird blob of circle with two fins on, like it's just weird looking fish.
It is a crazy looking
Google
fish.
it.
Anyway, scroll down when you get to this article. It's kind of annoying because it's USA Today, so it's just constantly blowing things in your face off to the side.
Yeah.
But it really is cool to look at, and there's a number of other articles about it. But I was really impressed that if Certified Fish Nerd came to the rescue and informed the world that what we had was something quite rare and quite special and really wild. And so there you go. Hoodwinker sunfish, from ocean sunfish, washed up on the beach in Oregon.
Well, not so fun.
Now, I'm going to bring it back home, my friend. Bring it back home to my old Midwest.
Missouri.
First one here is Missouri, our fine state right next door with a lot of fine fishing. And the MDC confirms fourth invasive northern snakehead captured.
Oh, they're making their way
Missouri.
around.
They are making their way around, and we're not going to say quit dumping your aquarium stuff in the water, but quit dumping your aquarium stuff in the water. It is illegal to move these around in Missouri. It's illegal to even have them in Missouri. But this is the fourth northern snakehead that has been recorded in the state. It was caught on May 25th below Wapapello Lake Spillway in Wayne County, Missouri. We all know. All right. Do we all know? I don't know. I should explain maybe. A snakehead is a fish that's named because, by golly, it has a head that looks just like a snakehead.
It looks almost like it looks like a python's head.
It looks exactly very python, absolutely. And yes, they're delicious. Yes, they're good fighters. Yes, they're really cool, but they don't belong here, and they compete. And right now, people that have to put up with them, which is up and down the East Coast, the bass are still in place. The thing is, but we know it's taking up space and eating things that the bass need and eating things that other fish need, and because they are voracious and they do not have the predators and they do not have the type of thing to keep them in control. And it's an air breather, so
so pretty dank waters. The guy, biologist Dave Newth from Missouri Department of Conservation, said the angler left it on the pavement for several hours thinking it would die. It never did. And so he called MDC. They came and got it. They transported it, and it did not expire in the bag either. So these things can wiggle from one body of water to another.
That is why you cannot, transport a live one. If you really want to fish for them, go to Delaware, go to Maryland, go to Virginia, go to a place, go. There's another variety, the spot tail snakehead down in Florida that get humongous. But anyway, that's the bad news. That's my bad news story for the Midwestern country.
Well, let's. I'm going to give the recommendation from the Missouri MDC, the Missouri
Department of Conservation.
Yeah, this is what they recommend to do if you catch one.
Yes.
First of all, make sure it's a snakehead because people can confuse them with the bowfin. So make sure you recognize it. Don't release a fish or throw it on the bank as it will migrate back into the water or it will move to a different water body because they're air breathers. Kill the fish by cutting its head off and gutting it. You want to treat it like Braveheart. So,
yes. No, Braveheart. No.
Yeah, just freedom. Just dismember them. You want to photograph the fish so the species can be positively identified. Of course, note the location and then report the catch to the MDC regional office. So that's how you do it. If you find one, don't put them back in the water. Don't put them in the bank. Make sure they're 100% dead. John, can you eat these things?
They are delicious, and in fact, a lot of the restaurants were, asking for them. If you do catch one, kill it, transport it responsibly, and I don't exactly know how they deal with food safety in this scenario, and I don't know if restaurants are still doing it, but they have had restaurants, use it as kind of a chi thing on their menu. But everyone that's tried them, Jimmy Lee from Raw Fishing, several other people, Reggae Girl, another IG account I follow down in Florida. She's like, well, it depends on where I catch it. Some of this water I catch them out of it's pretty nasty, and I wouldn't eat anything that came out of that water. But she goes, I've caught some in some decent water, and they are delicious. Yeah,
awesome, cool. John, can we strike the Kansas fish story for time, and we can use it next time if you want to, or were you set on it? Yeah.
No, I'm not set on it. You want to get onto that true crime, right?
I do.
All right, play the music. The Elver Smugglers.
Oh, I like smuggling elves.
Hey,
every time I go to the North Pole, I just stuff one in my pants and run away.
Let me see what's in your bag, sir.
Is that an elf in your pocket, or are you happy to see me? I'm smuggling Elvers. Every time I watch a dirty movie, my wife says, "Are you smuggling elves again?"
Here we go, Clay.
A new euphemism, John. This is perfect.
I can't, man. Okay, now I'm ready to get serious here.
Let's go.
Official sees around $500,000 worth of Elvers from Toronto Pearson Airport.
They found him in the airport.
Yeah, they got him at the airport. This one sent in by our own Tin Tackle Box Beat is just classic fish nerd stuff. A major seizure of baby eels at Toronto's Pearson International Airport that federal officials say was destined for shipment overseas is estimated to be worth between $400,000 and $500,000.
Yeah, it's crazy. The value of Elvers is obscene. In Maine, it's a multi-million-dollar industry. So yeah.
Apparently, it is absolutely insane. Okay, this is 109 kilograms of Elvers, and it was
that's a lot of fish because they're tiny. Each one can't even weigh an ounce or two. I mean, they're so yeah, small.
They say a couple grams. So even the big ones. Whatever. I'm just blown away by this. This was back in May. Mid-May, back on a Wednesday in mid-May. Funny things that journalists emphasize just to prove that
Wednesday matters.
That Wednesday matters, and that they actually looked at some information. But our message is crystal clear, says the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Border Services Agency. Our message is clear to you. Do not travel to Nova Scotia to illegally fish or export Elvers this year. Enforcement officers will be waiting for you, said Fisheries Minister Diane Libothrie. The French name, Clay.
You can do it.
My best. Fisheries Minister Diane Libothrie.
You're so close, John. I'm going to help you a little bit. You have to do it with a French accent.
Okay.
So after you say it, just end with, and then you've got it. I can't do it. I'm gonna let you do it.
Libothrie.
Perfect. See, I told you.
It worked. You are a genius. I've always said it. The thing about this is, the Elver fishery has gotten out of control. It's gotten violent. It's they're just tired of trying to regulate it, and because of the overfishing and the whole carrying on. But when you're talking about some product that's worth $5,000 a kilogram, I mean, it is up there with hard drugs, more than any fish, way more valuable than any fish that you're going to get in Canada or up around Maine and so on. And the commercial fishers up in Nova Scotia got on the government, and they're like, we're out here doing it legit. We're out here trying to earn a living legit. And if you're not going to enforce this sort of exploitation, then don't be surprised if more and more people don't start doing it in the way that they're doing it. And so the department said, how do they do it? They got the information. How are they going to do it? How they're going to catch these people? And what they do is they're night fished on these coastal rivers, and where they congregate in bunches. And as they're on their way up the river to take over their freshwater lives, that's where they intercept them. And all you need is a bucket and a funnel and a fike net or a dip net, and you can make 5-10 grand a night doing it.
Right. And for those who don't know, American eels are the species we're talking about, and they're born out near Bermuda in the Sargasso Sea, or near the Sargasso Sea. No one's ever found their breeding grounds yet. And so they'll live in fresh water for 7 to 14 years. And if you ever found an eel in North America, it's not a freshwater eel. There's no such thing. In North America, those are all American eels, all born in the same place. You can find them in every state in the country. They travel all over the place, and they'll go in underground rivers, and they're everywhere. So, there's a little history. By the way, you were talking about they're just giant groups of eels they're catching. Do you know what you call a group of eels?
I do not. A mess of eels.
Well, a mess would be close. You can call it a bed of eel or a fry of eel.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's a fun one.
Yeah, I just learned that.
Well, I don't even know what a plate of this costs, but at Chi-Chi restaurants in Asia, or who the end market is for this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. They buy the babies, they raise them to maturity, and they sell them for food, and they're used in unagi dishes and sushi dishes and so forth. Or people that know the culinary stuff more than me, unagi maybe is a type of sushi. Clay?
I don't know.
Okay.
It sounds right. Either unagi is eel, or it's or either it's eel or it's a sea urchin. I can't remember which one it is.
Well, anyway, the thing is, this restaurant trade will charge you a bunch of money for a couple bites of this thing. So apparently, a baby eel is worth getting and raising to adulthood, because you can get enough off of it to make all this hassle and all this expense worthwhile, because the people there are willing to pay a lot for them. Have you ever eaten eel before, Clay?
I haven't. It's delicious. Unagi is, by the way, eel, and it's delicious. I've eaten eel that I've caught, same species. I've eaten. I've eaten mature eels from the mouth of a river in brackish water, and I've eaten eels out of fresh water as well. And the fun thing about cooking an eel is, even after you cut it up into segments and you put it on the fry pan, it still keeps moving until it's done cooking. That's how you know it's done. It stops moving.
Is that? Are you yanking me, man, or is that for real?
That's not how you tell it's done, but
if it's still moving, it ain't done, right?
Yeah. I guess unless you're eating it as unagi raw eel, then it's just going to keep moving.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But I have eaten it, but I've never eaten. Never gotten dipped for Elvers. I know, even though they do it right on the coast of Maine here, I've never gone and done it, and I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not sure. I've got mixed feelings about it, because I want people to eat fish, but I don't know if it's good or bad.
Well,
whenever you hear about taking that many of an animal, I worry about it.
I do too. Really young or really old fish being used for in such a way, I think you're asking for trouble. And
yeah, I mean, arguably, by the way, most of that bed of eel or fry of eel that's small, I would say probably 98% of them as with most fish, are going to be eaten by other animals as well. So I don't know what you're hurting, but then there's less to then the ones you release are going to get eaten instead. So I don't, the ones that get away aren't going to make it either. So I don't know.
Well, right. If you need 50,000 of these things to run up a river just to have 5 of them make it, well, if you only have 500 run up the river, then you probably ain't gonna get none.
That seems about right. Yeah.
You know, I can't, if you just go by pure percentages and how many hiding places there are and luck of the draw or whatever gets an eel to survive, and they are survivors. They are the most crazy fish you'll ever.
I've seen them as roadkill, John.
I'll bet.
Yeah, because on a rainy night, they'll come out of the water, they'll hunt on the grasses, and they'll cross roads to get to other bodies of water. And I've seen them as roadkill. I've seen twice. I've seen eels on the road dead. Nowhere near the water.
Well, that is crazy. But anyway, the rise in eel prices is starting to cause problems. And that is your true crime fish in the news for today.
Well, thank you, John.
News, news, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
All right, brother. What do you say we get on with this super cute interview by our kid correspondent? And I'm not saying that to be precious or to be deprecating to Miss Rosie, but my golly, she is something else. And she asked some wonderful questions. Her mom, Jeanette, helped her out a little bit, but by and large, this young lady took this whole project by the horns, and boy, she just twisted it right on down to the dirt. And sit back and enjoy a sweet little interview of Rosie talking to Mr. Andy Weiner about his book, Down by the River.
Hey everyone, it's Rosie, and today we're interviewing Mr. Andrew Weiner, author of the amazing children's book, Down by the River. Mr. Andy is an avid fly fisherman all the way on the other side of the country in California. We have always loved the story he wrote about of families, fishing, adventure, and memories. So much that we had to share with you. Let's talk to Mr. Andy. Hello, Mr. Andy. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about your book on fishing.
Really happy to be here.
All right, let's do the questions. So, first up, Mr. Andy, what inspired you to write this book?
I love fishing, and I can tell that you love fishing too. And I have had a job working in publishing for many years, which means that I sell books to bookstores. And I've sold a lot of children's books over my long career, and I love children's books. So I thought maybe I know enough about books, and I know enough about fishing that I actually could write a story about fishing. And from the time I started writing it to the time that it got published, it was about 15 years. It took a long time. But just proves that if you stick with something, just like art in the story, if you stick with something, you'll probably succeed.
Yep, I agree. All right, so I've got another quick question. Who are you in this book? Are you the boy Art? Are you now even Grandpa?
Not a grandpa. I would say that I'm probably Art, because I started fishing around the same time that Art started fishing. I actually grew up back east. I grew up in New York, and my family would take vacations up in Maine, and we would fish in lakes up in Maine, and I fell in love with fishing from the very first day. That in those days, I threw a worm on a hook and was catching fish in a lake. So it's something I've really loved for how many years? 60 years maybe, because I'm a lot older than you are.
We have been fishing up in Maine. That's where Rosie caught her first striper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
We love Maine. It's beautiful up there.
Indeed. All right, so now I got another question. Why do you think it is important for people to see families, especially young kids, fishing together?
I think that it's such a healthy thing to do, both physically and mentally, and it's so fun. And the things that you can do with your family when you're growing up, it's the very, very best thing. And then as you get older, it's still the best thing to do. Rosie, do you have a brother or sister?
Yes, I have a brother. His name is Rex.
And how old is Rex?
He's 5.
And do you fish with him?
Yes.
Ah, that's so cool. You guys are going to be fishing together for the rest of your life.
I
Yep.
hope so.
All right. How long have you been fly fishing? Can you
That's a
tell
good
us what
question.
got you hooked?
Good pun. I probably have been fly fishing for over 30 years, something like that. And the story behind it is my wife and I went on a trip to visit her mother and her mother's husband. And my wife and I were going to stay in a cabin up in the mountains, in the Sierra Mountains. And my wife's mom's boyfriend said, "Why don't you borrow my fishing pole?" And he gave me his pole, which had a regular spinning reel on it. And he said, "And take some of these flies with you." And he had tied the flies. And he gave me a little bubble that you could use to float the fly.
Like a casting egg?
Exactly like that. And so there was a stream right where we were staying. And I hadn't fished in a few years. And I went out and it just had I had a streamer and a woolly bugger. And I caught a bunch of fish. And I thought, this is so great. Now I remember why I loved fishing so much. And I was working for a publisher. And we had a sales conference back in Vermont. And I decided, I knew there was a river nearby, and I knew we were going to have a free day. And so I brought the fishing rod, and I brought the bubble, and I brought the flies, and a couple of friends of mine and I went out and we fished on our free day. And I caught a fish. I caught a fish at a sales conference, which was amazing. And one of my friends lived in Seattle, and he said, "You know, that's not really fly fishing. You should get yourself a fly rod and a fly reel and some waders, and I'll meet you in Montana. And I'll take you fly fishing." And so we went up to Missoula, Montana, and we went fishing in Rock Creek, which is a very famous river. And I caught my first trout on a fly. I fell in the river for the first time and got soaked in my waders. And it was just so beautiful and so fun. And from then on, I've almost exclusively been a fly angler. I love it. It's the best.
When you go fishing, do you do catch and release, or you catch and eat, or do a little bit of both?
Most of the places I go, you're not allowed to keep the fish. So I would catch and release those fish for sure. But even when you are allowed to keep fish, I can't remember the last time I caught a fish. And I like fish to eat, but I know that it's important for the resource and for the health of the fishery to keep those fish alive so they can breed and there can be new generations of fish. And I think for the most part, people understand that and they do that. Do you catch and release, or do you keep your fish too?
Well, we only keep what we need, but we do a little bit of both.
I've done a lot of deep sea fishing when I was younger, when I lived in Southern California, and my dad and I would go out on boats and we would catch rockfish and things like that, and we would bring home a lot of fish and we would make fish cakes and cook fish fillets, and it was delicious.
Yeah.
And up here in Northern California, I was on a trip with my father-in-law, and we caught a couple of big salmon. And we brought those fish home, and we ate those fish. They were delicious. We grilled them with a little bit of salad dressing on it, like Paul Newman's Italian dressing as a marinade. It was delicious.
It was delicious.
Oh, you're making my mouth water.
That's what I'm here for.
That is one of Rosie's goals, to catch a salmon, but Dad likes to do the maple salmon.
Yes, that's the best.
That would be great.
We recently went to a Trout Unlimited community meeting about the sustainability of the fishery in Rhode Island, specifically the decline of the river herring. It was very sad. Do you have any concerns about this country's fisheries for the future, and any ideas for keeping it healthy so kids like me can continue to enjoy the delight of fishing?
You know, it's funny. I was just on vacation, and I went up to Idaho, and I went to a Trout Unlimited gathering too.
We saw that. We did.
And I think Trout Unlimited, they do so much great work because, like you, I do have a lot of concerns for the health of fisheries. There are so many things that have impacted them and reduced fish populations, reduced the health of watersheds. I actually think one of the great things that people can do is join Trout Unlimited. A family, and they have youth memberships, and they do so much great work for conservation, and they teach everybody how they can be responsible as well. At this Trout Unlimited rendezvous, I got to sit in on a couple of programs, and I was so impressed with how knowledgeable they were about the work that they do, and how practical the work that they do is, so that they actually are doing things that have an impact and can help restore fisheries so that they'll be around for generations. And that's actually one of the aspects of my book, Down by the River, that the place where the family fishes is somewhere that, as a family, they have fished for a long time. And it's still a healthy place, and there are still beautiful, beautiful fish there. And the fact is that if we don't take that responsibility, if we don't do that work, it's not going to be there for future generations, for your kids, Rosie, and your grandkids.
Yeah.
So we all have to work together to do that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're interested.
I think I should start my own community to help fish when I grow up.
I think you should. On Instagram, there are phenomenal women anglers.
Yes.
Many of whom I've gotten to know and have met in person, and they inspire me so much. And I know that they're better fly anglers than I am. I'm not proud about stuff like that. And they're exactly the kind of person that you're talking about, Rosie, where they care about conservation, they care about teaching other people how to fish, sharing the love of the sport. They are great, great people. I posted a picture that I think you guys liked on Instagram of a book by Cheyenne Orbis. Cheyenne is one of the very, very best people, and her book is wonderful. She's awesome. Inspires me.
Did you want to continue?
Of course. Alright, so here's another question. There are about 80 flies beautifully illustrated in the cover of the book. Miss April really did a great job making fly tying look like the art it truly is. Have you tied any of the flies in the book?
I'm laughing because I have a confession, Rosie. I don't tie flies. See these little hands? They're just not good for tying flies. And I actually love going to a fly shop in town when I'm traveling and saying, what flies should I be using? And then buying the flies. But I'll tell you the story about the flies in the book. When April was starting to illustrate it, I had to wait a year because she had LASIK eye surgery and her eyes were a little out of whack. And I was saving all sorts of pictures from fly fishing magazines. You know, what does it look like when there's a fish on your rod and it's bent? And what does a beautiful river look like? And then I bought her maybe 24 flies that I thought were sort of essential flies to use. And I gave them to her. And as she started sketching them, she fell in love with flies. And she posted a video when she was doing the work, and she had one of the flies, and she said, flies are so cool. So she went out and bought more flies, and instead of 24 flies in the book, you're right, there are almost 80 flies, and there are no repeats. And I know that a lot of people, when they share the book with their kids, tying the flies in the book is a project that they do. So it's a really great impetus for people to begin tying flies. Maybe someday it'll be an impetus for me to start tying, but probably not.
Here is our final question. What is your favorite fly to fish and favorite place to fish? Well, you don't have to tell us the exact spot. Maybe just tell us the body of water.
Okay. I would say my favorite fly is a purple haze, which is a parachute Adams with a purple body. It's sort of a go-to. And people say if the fish aren't biting on a particular kind of fly, that, you know, maybe there's a hatch coming off. If there's a fly that you feel confident in, that you just like fishing it, chances are you're going to catch fish with that fly. And purple haze is definitely one that is a favorite. In terms of places I'd love to fish, my favorite place, that's hard because there's so many favorite places that I have. 2 days ago, I was up in Northern California, north of Truckee, and there's a stream called the North Yuba River. And there's a particular spot that I absolutely love, and I've started taking my girlfriend there because I'm not married anymore. I just have a girlfriend now, and she has fallen in love with fishing in that spot also. And when I was up there, unfortunately on this trip, the runoff had just started and the river was really high, so I didn't catch any fish, but I was so happy to be there. But aside from that, there were places in Montana and New Mexico and Idaho and Colorado, California. I love to fish, so I'll tell you about one more place. Near Livingston, Montana, the Yellowstone River, there's a thing called the Mother's Day Caddis Hatch. And it doesn't happen on Mother's Day. It usually happens just before that. And I was fishing one year, and there was a stream, a section of the river that I waded across early in the day. There was nothing happening. And then at like 1 o'clock, 1:30, suddenly the air was full of millions of caddis. And suddenly the water, it was like a popcorn machine, and things are just popping everywhere. And it was fish coming up and eating these flies off the surface of the water. And it was incredible.
Wow.
And I kind of took a look at where I was, and there were 2 cottages. And I kind of drove back around to where the cottages were, and there was actually a little inn there. And I ended up staying at that inn for maybe 6 times. And I could walk out the back door of the cottage to my favorite spot to fish on the Yellowstone River. To me, that was sort of another of my very, very favorite places to fish.
We've actually been to Yellowstone before, like not the river, but we went to the place where there are all those geysers.
And we did a little bit of fly fishing, and we caught a few tiny browns, right?
There is great fishing in Yellowstone. And I'm gonna say this because it's not like it's an unknown place. My favorite stream to fish in Yellowstone is called Soda Butte Creek. And it's very, very accessible. It's right off the road. And this is a terrible thing to say as an angler, but people drive by, and if you've got a fish on when they're driving by, it's kind of a cool feeling that people are watching you and you've caught a fish. And there are terrific fish there. And there are bison right nearby. There are antelope right nearby.
Yeah, we've actually seen an entire herd of bison by the road once.
It's great. I was actually fishing in something called Slough Creek in Yellowstone, and I was all by myself, and suddenly I looked upstream, and there was a herd of buffalo making its way down towards me. And I thought, I wonder what this is going to be like. And what I've heard is that if you are where they're coming to, they're fine with it. But if you go to a place where they are, they're pretty territorial.
They're not okay.
And it gets dangerous. So you just have to be really smart about it. But they just, they came downstream and they walked around and they were on the other side of the river. And I have some pretty great photographs of it. Yellowstone is amazing for things like that. It's just what great experiences.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful place.
Really beautiful.
Well, that is all the time that we have with Mr. Andy for today, Rose. Mr. Andy, do you have any closing remarks? Would you like to promote any of your upcoming projects or new chapters coming up in your life?
The thing that I do a lot is I raise money for fly fishing associated nonprofits. And, I do work with one, Reeling in Serenity, which works with anglers who are working their sobriety and working on substance abuse issues. I think that's a great organization, but there are organizations like Casting for Recovery, which work with women who have had breast cancer or who do have breast cancer, and Real Recovery, which works with men with cancer. A really great one is the Mayfly Project, and they work with foster kids. They take foster kids on free fly fishing retreats. And what I do with my book, sell copies of the book and raise money for all of these different nonprofits. And at the Trout Unlimited rendezvous that I was at, they allowed me to sell some books, and I got to have everybody make a choice of whatever nonprofit they wanted money donated to. And there were a lot of different ones that people chose.
Yes.
So it's super fun.
That's great.
There are all those flies. I see them.
Yes.
My top favorite of all of them is the Fluttering Blue Damsel.
Nice.
on his beard.
I've never even fished that.
We haven't, but it's our favorite, I think, in the book, and we're looking forward to tying it. But there are flies in this book that we have used and we've been successful on. Dad has caught many rainbow trout this year on the San Juan worm and the woolly bugger.
Oh, yeah. San Juan worm is a classic, for sure. And, in the back of the book, there is information about fly fishing as a sport, about conservation, and also there are acknowledgments and dedications. And when you have a chance later on, read those. One's about my mom, one's about my dad, and one's for my friend John, who was the person I mentioned before, who said to me, that's not really fly fishing. So he got a special thank you in the book.
Excellent.
Another one of my favorites of these is the gray ghost streamer.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Indeed.
Indeed. Well, we wouldn't be here without John, so yes, he deserves a special thanks.
Yes, he does.
Indeed.
Hey, Rosie, thank you so much. It's been really fun and did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you again so much, Mr. Andy, for taking the time to speak with us. And thank you for writing such a fantastic book.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. I have to tell you, I mentioned the Mayfly Project, and the man who is one of the founders of the Mayfly Project, he calls me Mr. Andy too. So you're in good company.
Well, Mr. Andy, we will talk again soon, for sure. And we will let you know when the podcast is coming out. I believe it's slotted for June. And Mr. John will reach out to you to talk to you more about reeling in Serenity, for sure.
And maybe someday,
if you're on the East Coast, definitely give us a call.
You can show me how to cast a. What was your favorite fly? The gray ghost, maybe.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So
That would
cool.
be good. And I'll show you my purple haze.
And maybe I could teach you a little bit of fly tying.
Maybe you could, but I'm stubborn. But maybe you could. I'd love to watch you tie. That would be fun. Bye.
Bye.
Well, what'd you think of that, man?
I appreciate the work Rosie does. That's amazing and very nice job. By the way, John, you were talking about cute earlier. I'm immune to cute, in case you're curious.
Oh, you are you?
Yeah, it does not impact me.
Well, it affects me twice over. So
Right,
I
you
guess
get
I'm
my
taking
share
up your slack. Yeah.
Perfect. But nice job, Rosie. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate you.
I do want to mention I had to cut this part out for length, but they had a nice conversation about Mr. Weiner's organization that helps people recovering from alcoholism and substance abuse by getting them into fly fishing. The organization is called Reeling in Serenity, and Rosie and her dad are going to be tying up some flies to donate to their auction, which is coming up September 1st. You can go to reelingin-serenity.org to find out more about it, or to possibly donate if you tie flies. They would sure love for you to tie up a few flies and send them to them so they can auction them off and raise some funds. But if you didn't catch all that, don't worry, because September's a ways away, and we will certainly be mentioning this again. Okay, now, have you ever eaten sturgeon?
I have not eaten sturgeon. I've only ever seen two in my life, and one was yesterday. So nope, haven't eaten one. But I guess Joe Henry has.
He certainly has. And what gets me about sturgeon is that I understand the European people that came over here brought their love of sturgeon with them. I guess it's a real delicacy, and it's a high dollar item in a lot of your best delis in New York and other places in the East Coast. Fascinating thing to me. Smoked sturgeon, a delicacy, and Joe Henry's going to talk about it a little bit. And then I did a little research, and with the help of our piece on bluefish and smoking bluefish, I came up with some ways for you to fix it. So if you ever go on up to Lake of the Woods and you get yourself one of your sturgeon, well, you'll know what to do with it. So sit back and listen to Joe and me talk about eating sturgeon.
What are you gonna do with that fish that you caught? If you kill it, will you grill it? Will you blacken it in a skillet? We gotta make it delicious, so it's not for naught. Let's take a look at ways to cook it in the Fish Nerds Culinary Corner.
All right, thanks for stopping in at Culinary Corner. I've got a quick little story coming up right here with Joe Henry on his experience with catching and keeping a sturgeon and having it smoked. And then we are going to go and kind of just summarize some of the ideas, some of the recipes around smoking sturgeon. But first of all, a short story from our friend Joe Henry. I want to know how sturgeon is as a table fish. You ever ate them, Joe?
I have. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I caught one through the ice. Now, our sturgeon to keep them is they got to be 45 to 50 inches or over 75. So most people are keeping a 45 to 50 incher. And a buddy of mine says, "Hey, I work at a meat market. I can get it smoked for free, Joe, and I'll just bring the meat back to you." Well, guess what? By the time I got the meat back, I had about a quarter of the sturgeon left because my buddies devoured 3/4. And the reason I did it, Joe, it was so good. We couldn't stop. It was so good. Sturgeon meat is very, very good. Now, some people smoke it. Some people talk about the consistency almost being like a steak, but a lot of people smoke it. It's very rich. It's very, very good. I've only harvested one in my life, and it was impressive. It was very good, and you'll see that when you look on the internet to people's opinions about sturgeon. Now, I heard the real big ones aren't as good, but I tell you what, in our case, a 45 to 50 inch or midsize, very good eating.
All right, so I lifted this little segment out because I just kind of wanted to put it off in its own space in a culinary corner. Does not surprise me in the least that sturgeon is considered a delicacy here in the United States, as it has been the fish of kings for centuries and centuries and centuries, not just in Europe, but also, of course, in the Middle East. And we're not just talking about the caviar, serving up sturgeon, big, huge pieces of sturgeon at feasts and so forth, is a tradition that literally goes back to the biblical times. Now, sturgeon can be fixed a variety of ways. It's very popular grilled. It's very popular baked. It is also very popular to sear it off in a pan and then finish it in the oven like Chef Jamie Moffat often does. However, the prevailing, most favored method is to take it and smoke it. As Joe mentioned, it is a oily, rich fish along the line of a bluefish or a salmon. I would suggest that you refer back to the Christmas episode where I talk about lacquered salmon, and also our more recent episode where Todd, the fish wrap writer, tells us all about how to smoke bluefish, because especially Todd's piece has the information you need to become a fish smoking master, whereas the piece on lacquered salmon talks about flavors. The main takeaway you're going to get from Todd's piece on smoking bluefish is that you really want, especially on a oily fish like this, you really want to get a pericle to form on that fish. Now, a pericle is that dried out layer on top of a piece of meat. On red meat, like a dry aged steak, the pericle is generally removed before cooking and then used to make stock or hamburgers or something else. But on fish, you want the pericle on there because it firms up the flesh. It keeps the fat from bubbling up through the top of the fish and cooking off on the top of the fish rather than staying down in just under the surface. And it just gives that smoke something to stick to, so you get some outstanding flavor. And you'll notice in the two recipes that I submitted that both of them recommend slathering the chunk of sturgeon with some whiskey or brandy. And that's not just for flavor. That is also to help the pericle form, because alcohol evaporates more quickly and takes water away with it when it does. And so it leaves behind some flavor, but also helps that pericle to form. So when we get into looking at the actual recipes, that's what the booze is for. You don't have to do it, but it does help. Now, what you want to do on these recipes is a low temperature smoke. This is not cold smoking. Cold smoking is done at temperatures well under 100 degrees. It is a type of curing. It is mainly to keep humidity down and to allow salt and sugar and so forth to cure out the meat and give it a nice dry, smoky environment where it can flavor up and cure out. But this is low temperature smoking. This is where you want to be in the 150, 160 range. Fish is a delicate smoke. It's a slower smoke. It's also a lot of people using other cuts of meat. We'll start at a hotter smoke and then we'll back off and let the piece of meat finish at a lower smoke. And also remember that smoking and barbecuing are also two different things. Grilling, barbecuing, and smoking are three different types of cooking. They're very closely related. They use a lot of the same equipment, a lot of the same materials, but they are very distinct. What we are talking about here is smoking. Therefore, that means a low temperature around 160 degrees. Okay, for sturgeon, alderwood is recommended. So is oak. So are the fruit woods. One of the chefs, Chef Seaver / Chef Shaw reporting on Chef Seaver's recipe, recommends alderwood. He likes a milder wood. But, of course, Todd for the bluefish, and we know for salmon, mesquite, or hickory, something a little stronger is in order. But you may not want to go that strong with sturgeon. The great thing about smoking and the great thing about doing these types of fish is that your flavors can be all over the place to your preference. There's just certain basics that you may or may not want to follow. People like, mapley flavor. People like a little garlic salt flavor in there, a little garlicky flavor in with a lot of these smoke recipes to give support to the other flavors. The main thing is, and the reason I refer to the lacquered salmon piece that we did at Christmas, is that the variations are just innumerable. There are tons and tons of ways to do this. It's based on principles. The basic principles are: you use a dry rub. You could use a brine, but a dry rub is highly recommended because these are smaller pieces of fish. They're going to go in at a real low temperature, but they're not going to cook that long. A 1 pound piece of sturgeon generally will be on a Weber-style grill for an hour or two. But if you're using a traditional smoker, a 1 pound piece of sturgeon will be in there for up to 4 hours. You can take it longer if you want, but you don't want to go too long because you don't want to dry the fish out, of course, and you don't want to smoke it till it starts to be bitter, have sort of an off flavor because of being around in the smoke too long, which is entirely possible. Okay, so there's a couple of holes in Chef Margosian's recipe, the way it ended up getting written down and published on the Wolf Fish Store in Boston. It's on their website. He talks about having alcohol involved, having some whiskey involved, but he never points out how to use it. Also, he makes an enormous amount of rub, 2 cups for one piece of sturgeon weighing 1 pound. That is way more than you are going to need. But it's actually just, I think, the easiest way to point out the ratio. His ratio is 1-to-1, whereas chefs Shaw and Seaver, they like a ratio of sugar at 0.25 to 1 of salt. So once again, you see the variation. You see the ideas here. Sugar and salt function in largely the same way. Sugar is very acid, in addition to being able to create the osmosis that draws out some of the flavor and allows some of the flavor from the sugar to go in. And of course, you can use maple sugar, cane sugar, white sugar. Margosian recommends brown sugar. Seaver and Shaw recommend just plain sugar. So, you go with that the way you want to go. Now, another hole in Margosian's article is that he never says specifically what temperature one should use when smoking a nice piece of sturgeon on a Weber. I know you can keep a Weber at 160. You just have to play with the vents. You just have to play with the amount of coals that are in there. It can be a little difficult to smoke things on a Weber. A lot of times you have to have a little can of coals kind of on the side at the ready to add a few more, because you really don't want to have too much fire at once. But then again, it depends on the size of the Weber and so on, and how much fire you have in there. But you can really use the vents, especially the top vent. The bottom one, I don't mess with it once the fire's going. That's just crazy and too difficult for me. And it's always dirty and it's always stuck, so I just leave it wide open. But the top vent can be diddled around, and it really is a good idea if you're going to smoke a lot on your Weber to buy a little therm that you can just stick down in the vent hole and take the temperature and find out what's going on in there, or lift up and stick it in the side. And an instant read is worth the investment because, of course, when you're smoking at a low temperature and you open the lid, you basically lose all your heat. I mean, it's bad enough if you're doing a pork shoulder or something where, it can be a little hotter. It's up in the 180, 190, degree area. But in any case, or in either case, it's much better to have something that reads it quickly and effectively so that you do not lose all your heat out the edge as you open the lid a crack to stick in your thermometer, or you crank open the vents on top to get the thermometer in there, and all of a sudden the temperature starts going way up because you're adding lots and lots of oxygen all of a sudden. So instant read, if you're going to smoke a lot, would be a good investment. However, it is far from essential. Because the main thing is on a Weber, you just get out there, you just check, you see how fast it's going. You're going to have to check it. And that's kind of the fun of using a Weber, is you get to stand out in the yard and chit-chat or listen to the birds or stand there and drink a beer or whatever you want to do. And you just got to kind of keep an eye on it, where we have these pellet smokers now that are kind of set it and forget it, which go whichever way you want. It's up to you. But a lot of people have Webers, and they're not that expensive, and the knockoffs are even less so. And I like to talk about equipment most people are liable to have, because you can sure get it done. There's always the perfect situation, and there's the get her done situation, and you can certainly get this recipe done on a Weber. So the main principles are: create a dry rub, create it with sugar, create it with salt, create it with some seasoning. Shaw and Seaver use mace. Both chefs use some garlic powder, garlic salt. You can use whatever you want, whatever you like. The reason, of course, we're going to use a dry rub once again is because a brine is going to leave the fish wet. And even if you pat it dry, it's just more difficult to get it to smoke, they say. They just much prefer in this low temperature smoke environment to go with the dry rub instead. Anyway, you put the dry rub on for 1 hour per pound. So you don't want to leave it on too long, or otherwise it's going to draw off too much of the juice. Then you rinse that rub off. You pat the fish dry, then you splash it with the booze, if you're so inclined, some brandy or some nice bourbon. I would recommend a nice bourbon because it has such a wonderful charred wood flavor to it already that it really works right in there with the smoke. And then you put it in the refrigerator on a rack, with a pan under it or some newspaper under it or something in case it drips a little bit. But you put it on a rack in the refrigerator overnight to allow the pericle to form. Todd recommends leaving bluefish out on the table on a cooler day in a cooler environment, but you pick which way you want to do it. Both the recipes I found for sturgeon say leaving it in the fridge to let the pericle form is just fine. Then you place it on the smoker and you smoke it for about, on a Weber, it's only, going to be 1 to 2 hours. Whereas in a smoker, in a more controlled environment like a smoker, you can smoke it 4 hours or even more, depending on how you want the consistency of the fish. Chefs Shaw and Seaver, they like to smoke it for right at 4 hours. That gets it just done in the middle, leaves it super moist. And when it is smoked, sturgeon is a very firm, nice fish that slices beautifully, presents beautifully. You're going to have a great time eating it. All right, one last quick note, and then we're going to get on out of here. I just want to talk about cleaning these darn things. I sat for an hour watching YouTube videos and watch guys clean white sturgeon and even down to little shovel-nosed sturgeon. And the one thing you need to remember, well, there's two things you need to remember. One is they are a dinosaur fish like gar, and surprise, they have armor. They have scutes. They have a thick skin. These fish have survived for a long, long time, tens of millions of years, and then basically the same form they are now. And the way they got that done was by having armor and a way to survive being attacked and eaten by these gigantic other dinosaur fish that we love to look at the bones of these days. But also, unlike gar, you've got to be really careful about not penetrating the body cavity. You don't want to poke that sac. You don't want to let the fluid in the body cavity out. A lot of guys will cut the tail off the sturgeon, and some guys cut the head and tail off the sturgeon, let them bleed out, let some of that come out. But whether you're cleaning a little bitty shovel-nosed sturgeon, because they only, 20 inches a good one, 30 inches a whopper, that's a record-setting big one, or a big lake sturgeon or white sturgeon, you want to clean them in a way that does not penetrate that body cavity. And I put a video up of a gentleman cleaning a white sturgeon out of Puget Sound, or one of the tributaries into Puget Sound, and he makes an extreme point of this and shows a very good way to get around that skin. And a lot like Jeff laying out the gar, you basically kind of just separate the skin from the meat and sort of just unwrap the fish. And remember that sturgeon is not a bony fish. It has a notochord and it has structural elements, but they're not formed into full bones the way they are in most of the fish we clean. However, that does not mean you want to leave that stuff in there either, because it's cartilaginous. It's like eating gristle. So you want to go ahead and take some of that out. And this video shows you how to produce very good fillets of 100% edible sturgeon, and shows you the various knives and the various methods in order to do that. Alrighty, that is my report on how to cook sturgeon. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep a sturgeon or not. I know a place where I could go probably catch some shovel-nosed sturgeon in the Kansas River, the Kaw, but the stretch that I would fish between Lawrence and DeSoto is one of the worst stretches for PCBs, so they recommend that you eat no bottom-feeding fish out of that area, and so I would have to probably travel somewhere, the Blue River up there by Manhattan, Kansas, or some other river, the Republican, or some other river where the water is a bit cleaner and the industry was not as fierce, and get some there. And you're bound to get some bycatch when you go out to fish for shovel-nosed sturgeon, or any sturgeon really, because you use things like worms and sandworms and shrimp and stuff that other fish like. So you're liable to come home with eels or catfish or anything like that. But I am, I don't know whether I could keep one or not. I think I probably have to release it at this point. But the good news is, if you're feeling luxe and you've got some spare spending money, you can buy sturgeon. As we reported on Fish Nerds, the sturgeon is being farmed in California, where they are stripping the eggs and selling the eggs as caviar, and occasionally they will harvest some of the sturgeon for food, and it runs between $30 and $40 a pound. You can get it through Wolf's. They sell nice super frozen 1 pound packages. I'm not sure what super frozen means, except that look I get if I do something wrong around the house. But other than that, it does mean a fish that's been frozen well and vacuum packed in a way that it preserves it for a long, long time. And you can buy it commercially. Okay, so experiment with sturgeon or not, but I just wanted to report on how you could do it if you do end up getting one. I know you folks up in Wisconsin, up in Minnesota, and so forth. You guys all know how to do up them sturgeon and have your own recipes. And please feel free to chime in by calling the Fish Nerds hotline at 607-378-FISH and let us in on how you fix sturgeon, especially if you smoke it, and either take exception or have praise for what I have described here, because I would really like to hear from someone who's actually done it. All righty, this has been your Culinary Corner on sturgeon. Thank you one more time to Joe Henry for bringing us this great story about this fantastic fish.
What are you gonna do with that fish that you caught? If you kill it, will you grill it? Will you blacken it in the skillet? We gotta make it delicious, so it's not for naught. Let's take a look at ways to cook it in the Fish Nerds Culinary Corner.
All right, John, 100% I would eat it.
100% I would eat it. It sounds too good. I can't believe poor Joe. Friends are friends, your bros are your bros, man. But eat up more than half of his sturgeon,
Well, he would have been sadder if they didn't eat any of it.
That's true. That's true. They were like, I don't like the smell of this. Here, you can have it. No, that is a great story. Of course, Joe is fantastic. He's just got story after story after story. But you know what, Clay?
What's that?
I think we've told enough stories for one day. We've had these people in here listening to us to talk about fish stuff when they should have been out fishing.
They really should have been. A lot of people think on this episode, John.
We
Got to
certainly
thank Rosie and
Jeanette, her mom,
Mr. Andrew Weiner. We've got to thank
Weiner.
Joe Henry. Weiner, excuse me. I just read words, John. We have to thank Joe Henry, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we miss who we missing.
The usual suspects: Wally Pleasant, Diana's Bath Salts, Mysterious Baitcaster Cylinder, On Jones for Chocolate Cookie Jam, which is what I used to put the theme music in Rosie's piece. And then I did not get the attribution for our crime music, but that guy too.
Thanks, that guy. We also need to we need to do some. We forgot to go back in time and thank Dr. Catherine McDonald.
Dr. Catherine McDonald, I am sorry, doctor. We've neglected to thank you about all your information about your fine organization, the Day Trip School.
Or the Field School with...
thank you. The Day Trip School. Good grief. Somebody hit me with something hard here.
We like to say thank you. We just suck at it. So whatever we missed, thank you. John, until next time, follow the code of the Fish Nerds.
Spawn early and often.
Never trust a free lunch with strings attached.
And swim against the current every chance you get.
I don't know how we did it, but we did it, John. We made a podcast.
Woohoo! We just got through by the skin of our teeth.
All right. Nice work, John.
We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right. I got to go.
All right. Bye-bye.
Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean, casting nets, fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Just for the halibut.
Fried in a basket or broiled in a pan. Eat it raw like you're in Siam. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.